Hey, it's Jack Maxwell. Welcome to the High Road live Q&A, which is different than the High Road itself. That's a mini segment of a show that will air at the top of the hour. But in the meantime, we'll take your questions on all things the High Road. So what is the High Road exactly? Well, as you know, I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I went through chemo. I was turned on to the medicinal benefits of CBD and CBD THC, even as a combination. And not being a cannabis user, this surprised me how much it brought me relief from pain, helped me sleep, etc. I am not advocating it as a cure-all. I'm not saying it's a miracle drug that can help you in every way possible, but I am saying let's open our minds to the possibilities, because for so long it was prohibited, and for not the best of reasons, for economic reasons, for racial reasons. And now it's coming back around thanks to the discovery, let's say, of CBD in hemp in the 80s. So we're going to talk about all things that. And then at the top of the hour, there's the mini episode that's going to focus on the law of cannabis. Now, in Colorado, there are two powerful, strong, wonderfully passionate women who, through their own ways, helped change the laws in Colorado, which then, of course, created a domino effect, and a lot of laws around the nation changed. Colorado is one of the first two states to make cannabis recreationally available and remove the prohibition on it. Then, of course, the Farm Bill passed, and then they removed the prohibition federally on hemp. I know that's a lot to digest, but thankfully, you can ask me any question you want other than medical questions. I'll answer whatever I can. I can tell you about my medical journey, but I can't give you medical advice, of course. But I was going to say, thankfully, we have a guest on who is really, he's one of the top 100 most influential people in cannabis, according to a recent article. And he knows what he's doing. He's also someone who helped make the High Road possible. But he's as knowledgeable in all things cannabis as anybody I know, the political side, the legal side, economics, all of it. And we're going to talk to him about all of that and everything he knows. But again, focusing on the laws, because without laws, nothing can be done, right? Not legally. Anyway, so do you have any questions? Let's get to them if you do, because this is for you, this live Q&A, then the show, and then followed by a one-on-one interview. So this is your time. If you want to ask me anything about the show, what it's like to film a show, anything about my medical condition, anything you want to share, stories about yours or comments about yours. Have you used cannabis for medicinal purposes? Have you used it for recreational purposes? Do you find it helps? Do you find it does not help? Are you concerned about any aspect of it? You can ask and we'll get to them. But this guy, he's been a successful entrepreneur for around 25 years now, though he won't want me to say that because that kind of dates him. But as an entrepreneur, as a board member, as a thought leader, and what do leaders do? Well, they lead by example, and they think into the future. They are ahead of the curve. And this guy was in the booze business, and he saw the convergence of alcoholic beverages and legal cannabis. So he's now the chairman and CEO of Vertical Wellness. Say hello to Smoke Wallen. Hey, Smoke.
Hey, Jack.
How's things?
They're great. Good to see you.
You too. Thanks for being on.
Glad to be here.
And for your work in making the High Road possible. We talked about the laws, and as you know, as we said, coming up at the top of the hour, I go to Colorado to talk to a couple of women who helped change the laws. Without the laws, though, of course, we can't do anything. And I know you've been to Washington several times. Tell me about your efforts in Washington.
Yeah, so I've been mostly working on the legal status of CBD. So as you know, Jack, hemp became legal with the Farm Bill of 2018, and that allowed hemp to be grown and put into products all across the country based on state by state adopting the rules. But we ended up with a little bit of a snag, and that snag was when you extract the hemp and you create CBD, and then you put that into different products, the FDA, which has oversight into things you consume, decided that it was not permitted to allow consumable, ingestible CBD because of some regulations that they have. And so they have put the brakes a little bit on the industry, even though everyone was very excited. We grew 1,800 acres of hemp in 2019, which produced about 4 million pounds, which is a lot. And we are extracting that into CBD. And then lo and behold, the FDA kind of holds us up. So the thing I've been working on the most is a bipartisan effort to enable us to sell CBD, which we know is safe. We know there's lots and lots of uses of it in ingestibles, so that it's allowed to be sold at a Walmart and a Target and a Kroger and all those different stores. Right now, we're only permitted to put it into topicals like lotions and massage oil and that kind of thing. Now, you know, and I know that if we go down the street to any bodega or any convenience store, you're going to find ingestible CBD. That's because the entire country is ignoring the FDA. I'm not, but a lot of the people are. And we're trying to get it cleaned up so that it's a clean, regulated market. You know what you're getting. And the likes of Walmart and Target will put it in, because they're not going to do it until we clear up the FDA issue.
I know that, and I wanted to make sure I got this right. You were named one of the, was it 100 most influential people in cannabis in the United States recently?
I was very flattered by High Times Magazine to select me among a bunch of other industry leaders, and I think it's certainly not due to tenure, because as you pointed out, I spent a lot of time in the booze business, like you did, or actually longer than you did, I think, and I was a relative newcomer to cannabis and the hemp space, but I think if you believe in something and you are willing to stand up and make your point heard in Washington or wherever else, people recognize you. So I feel privileged to have been selected there and be among all those great leaders that are in it.
And you recently wrote an article about all the issues surrounding cannabis, legal, political, etc. Tell us about that.
Well, I've written two specifically on these topics. One I wrote last year. If you recall, I wrote an article about the repeal of prohibition. And that's really about full-on cannabis with THC and my view on when federal prohibition may happen. And I use those words specifically because, just like you did, I came out of the booze business. Everything in my whole work career has been around, thinking about like, oh, they used to have prohibition and then we repealed it in 1933. And we've had the current alcohol system that we all have grown to live with. And where we are with cannabis is kind of like 1933. I mean, it's legal at the state level, but it's still federally not legal. So we've got to fix that federal prohibition. And that's what I believe. I believe that there will be a repeal of prohibition at the federal level, which will permit states and localities to choose their own laws and decide if and when they want to have cannabis products, which they're doing now anyway, in spite of the federal government. But I think the federal law will look like prohibition repeal, like the 21st Amendment, and it will essentially allow states to choose. So that was the thing I wrote last year. When I wrote that, you might remember, Jack, that I said that I thought it could happen before the next election. I'm not really in the predicting game so often, and I don't have any idea if it could actually get passed, but there's quite a few people trying to get something in the next stimulus bill that would at least permit banking and Safe Banking Act and other things that would allow cannabis banking, which would be a big step toward prohibition repeal. Yeah,
that's one of the things I was really surprised at when I went to Colorado. I also sat with Brian Rudin, who created Starbuds, and he said the worst part of it is the regulations as they relate to banking. He's had several banks, from what I remember, shut him down. They wouldn't let him do business, even though what he was doing was legal, because they just don't want to be tainted with what they think is the stink of something that either may be illegal at one time or was and still has a stigma attached. I think they're thinking down the road. They feel like they might lose some business. It's really crazy. And I know you can't say, as you say, you're not in the business of prognosticating, but what do you think the outside is at the very latest before it's repealed, prohibition on cannabis, all types? 2 years, 3 years, 5?
Less than 5 for sure. And I think it depends on, it's very difficult in this crazy environment with shutdown and everything else, but
Sure.
there is a possibility something could happen before the election, probably not. But I think certainly in the next couple of years, there's widespread support. If you look at the latest Gallup polls, majorities of conservatives, majorities of Republicans, majorities of seniors, majorities of veterans, majorities of groups that maybe traditionally would have been opposed to this are now in favor of at least some form of cannabis prohibition repeal, at the very least at the medical level. And I think that at the end of the day, there can be a lag between public sentiment and what politicians do, but at the end of the day, they are elected by the public, and at some point they're going to have to listen to the majorities of every single constituency that they deal with. And that's coming sooner rather than later.
That's one of the things that surprised me when I was shooting the high road is as you say, these groups who would traditionally be against this, you would think, are for it because they see what's going on with their friends, family, whatever, neighbors, and they're getting stories, but hey, this works for me or this works for that. No, it can't. It's this horrible thing. No, trust me, this thing works. So it's nice to see that people who would normally be very steadfast in their opposition are at least considering it based on what everybody's telling them. Not just
Jack, and to that point, I just read an article, I think this morning, that was talking about, it looked at the prescription opiate incidence and the amount of opiates that are prescribed state by state, and it's gone down dramatically in states that have permitted medical cannabis. So, I mean, there's just one example of like people substituting drug. Look, opiates are great if you have acute pain, but they're terrible for anything that's long term, right? They wear off. You have to use more and more, and we all know all the problems that we've had in the country with opiates. They're great for a short term thing. Cannabis is a great substitute. So I think there's a lot of promising signs that we're going to get that. And I see you have some questions from your fans and audience, Jack. I don't want to take up.
Yeah, no, can we get, that's okay. That's what you're saying is very important. You're setting this whole thing up, and that will help with the questions. So we know who you are and what it is you're capable of answering. And it sounds like, a lot of it, obviously that's, we've known each other for a while now, and I know you do. And I know rightfully you were named one of the 100 most influential people, but enough of that. Let's get to it. A previous question to this, and we're going to hold Kevin's for 1 second. Frank B, and I thought this was a really great question. Do you use products yourself, and what have you found that's best for you, and for what reason?
You're asking me that?
Yeah, I mean, do you use subs? I know you're quite athletic.
Yeah, so I'm an old ex-college wrestler, and I've broken both my ankles a couple times, and I for years took ibuprofen to manage the swelling and pain in my ankles just as a regular basis. And I've virtually eliminated that using CBD to manage my own personal, inflammation and pain. And it's been a wonderful change because, with the CBD, I'm not having any issues with digestion or stomach. And it seems to have an equal or better effect than I was using when I was using off-the-shelf medicines. So for me, I use it for that. I also do use cannabis for sleeping. For me, it's a magical sleeping pill, and it's natural, and I get a great night's sleep. So for me, at the end of the night, it's a great sleep aid.
It's the old what came first, chicken or the egg? Did you start using and then say this is a good business to get into, or did you get into the business and start using products?
No, I was not in the club of users. Now, not to say that I haven't seen it or been around it, but that wasn't my pack for the most part. So for me, I went down a journey somewhat like you're going down, where I just tried to learn about the business. And as I learned about it, I started saying, well, maybe I should try some of this for things that I need personally and in my family. So no, I wasn't a big user. I was just I grew up in the 80s, with Nancy Reagan, the greatest saleswoman ever to exist. She convinced us all that this is your brain on drugs, and that it was bad. And I thought that too until I learned.
Sure. Speaking of business side of it, Kevin wants to know, you think this is still a good time to get into the cannabis business? Whatever that means, maybe investing or something. Oh, there it is. Is it a good time for investors with everything else going on right now? Good question. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, it's funny. The last year has been pretty tough for the public cannabis companies. They've traded down quite a bit. And I think the hype a couple years ago got really, really big, and a lot of people jumped in. But these companies were mostly in Canada, and they were thinly traded. What we've seen in this shutdown through COVID-19 is that cannabis has held up strongly. It's been deemed an essential business in just about every state, and the sales have been strong. People are using cannabis to manage their anxiety and their sleeplessness and their issues they're having in this shutdown time. And I think what's happening is you're seeing the separation of the pack. You're seeing the better run companies that are running businesses that are succeeding, that have cash flow, that understand what they're doing, starting to really separate. And you're seeing that in the stock prices of some of these things. So I think to Kevin's question, we're still in the, I would have said, spring training, not even in the early innings of the season of this business. But that being said, the next wave of investment is going to be a lot more sophisticated. It's going to be a lot of people from outside the industry who understand how to scale businesses. And I wouldn't want to go into it lightly capitalized, but I would want to go into it with people that have been successful in other industries. So I think it's a great time, but it's you got to pick your spots.
I like what you said about prohibition. I want to get that back to that in a minute. But Lisa wants to know, is there any kind of labeling or seals to look for on current CBD products to know whether it's legit or not?
So that's a great question, Lisa. One of the problems with the current regulatory landscape is that you've got all these products that are not necessarily legitimate being sold in convenience stores and bodegas and up and down the street, because these are people that are willing to violate the FDA rules. So one of the things that I look for, and as we bring out products, we do, is there's got to be some kind of code on the package, whether it's a QR code or some other thing that you can scan that will take you to a website that has the COA. That's a certificate of authenticity, right? It basically tells you what's in the package. Right. And you ought to be able to scan a package, find out what the COA says, and know that it came from a GMP factory that's FDA approved, that has, these bona fides, right? So that's a lot of jargon, but the bottom line is you should be able to find out where things are coming from and what's exactly in them on the package. And if it doesn't have that, I would stay away from it.
And you say we should have that. Is that coming? Will there be some kind of federal regulation so that the efficacy is what would one thing, but to see that, if it says 10 milligrams of CBD, how do we know that? So I think that's really important, because who's going to be the first Pepsi or Xerox or Kleenex? That you say, this is the company that we all look to as the leader. Not that you have that answer, but it starts somewhere when we regulate across the board, no?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, all of the legitimate companies are in favor of a regulated market, because if you have nothing to hide, you want to share where things come from, right? So it's definitely in the interest of the consumer, the public, and the companies that are doing it right, to make sure there's transparency of supply chain. And when I say that, you know that we've got large farms in Kentucky where we're growing hemp. And we know where our farmers grow the hemp. We know we take the hemp off of those farms. We dry it at our factory in Kentucky. We extract the CBD from the plant, and then we put it into our brands. And that visibility of supply chain is really important. I'm not buying CBD from, the open market, and a bunch of that stuff was coming from China in years past. And I don't think, I don't mind buying my iPhone from China, although that might change soon. I don't necessarily want to consume my CBD from China. So
that being said, vertical means then from the very beginning, right? It's vertically integrated. You plant it, you grow it, you bottle it, you send it out, and then you work with other companies as well. You have partnerships with other companies and quite a few celebrities as well. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we have recently we announced a partnership with Kathy Ireland Worldwide. Kathy's you probably know her as a supermodel growing up.
Supermodel, but now a super entrepreneur.
She's a mega business person, super leader in the world of business, and we were super excited to partner with Kathy, and we're coming out with Kathy Ireland Health and Wellness brands of CBD that will roll out to major retail, and you couldn't ask for a better partner than Kathy and her team.
You think she's watching this right now, Smoke?
I hope so. If she's not, I'm definitely going to send her a link to it after if she's not.
Me and all my friends had you on their wall when we were kids. I'm sure Smoke did too. What a time that was. And the thing I like about Kathy Ireland, and I'm not trying to promote your company here, is, supermodel, right? And you don't know anything else about her other than she looks great, and that's why she's on Sports Illustrated and all this. But she was the first supermodel in my memory to go from that to being this highly successful business person. It almost blows your mind because, of course, we stereotype. We say, well, she's gorgeous, but we didn't know she was so smart as well to get into not only with you, of course, but I mean, before you, she was highly successful. You don't see that too often. Kind of rare.
Yeah, and I think when I first met her team, they were very clear that Kathy is the CEO and chief creative officer of her company. And so, yes, of course, she's a beautiful person and she's got a great, way about her. But she's running her business, and she makes those final calls on the pieces of like what goes into each of her brands and everything else. So she's very active, and we're excited to be a part of that. And for me, it's about educating the consumer. You've had some questions, and I know we didn't get to all of them, but some of the questions have been about, how do you know what's good and what's not good, and what's the difference between medical and not medical? And I think, one of the ways that we can help move the public's knowledge up is to have great partners like Kathy who can articulate and be very clear on why it is that she likes the products, what she's using it for, and how we're getting the message out is really important.
And let's be honest, when you know someone and you trust them, whether you want to call them a celebrity or an influencer or whatever, it brings legitimacy to whatever the product is. That's why people hire celebrities. And someone like Kathy, who is a celebrity but also a smart business person, it makes you think, well, if this person is willing to get into business with, in this case, your business, then you say, well, they're probably pretty good. Smart move on your part.
Yeah, no, thank you. I see Philip has a question about the farmers, and maybe if you want me, I'll jump in there. So are the farmers making money? Here's the thing. When the Farm Bill passed in 2018, a lot of people decided, oh, this is our chance to a lot of farms have been struggling. The price of soybeans and corn and wheat and tobacco have been really depressed, and a lot of people looked at hemp as a great growth opportunity, and I believe it is. But that being said, the first year, a lot of people jumped into it, grew it on spec without having necessarily a home for it. And we had a bottleneck in processing. We had a lot of plants, a lot of harvests that happened. Millions and millions of pounds got off these farms, and a lot of them didn't have a place to dry it, to extract it into oil, to put it in the brands. And then you add to that the FDA slowing everything down with their ban on ingestibles, and that held up Walmart and Target and all these other guys who were about to put it in. So all of that just led to some disruption in the market. So certainly some farmers have struggled. Some have done pretty well. I think long term, it's still a great opportunity for a lot of American farmers, but they have to be smart about it, and they have to be careful about who they do business with, and just where it's going to go once it's grown.
It reminds me of the 49ers. And I don't mean the football team. I mean 1849. Everyone, gold rush. Let's all go get rich. Everybody goes. Some people don't make it past the Donner Pass. Some, which it was called that, obviously, because of what happened. But all the challenges from wherever they were to getting to these gold mines with dreams of fortunes in their head, kind of similar to me in that way. And then, of course, the ones who know what they're doing, and maybe takes a little bit of luck as well. But to like you say, to be fully capitalized, to understand the ones that are run, they want regulation, so they're going to be just fine. Let's go back to prohibition, because that fascinates me. Because the episode we're about to show is more about the law and legalities. So prohibition, the 18th Amendment comes along. The temperance movement wants to shut it all down, so they say, okay, that's it, no more. It's prohibited from 1920 to 1933, and then the 21st Amendment pulls it, and then everybody gets into the business. And I think Seagram's was one of them, and I know you worked for them. This is similar. It's who's positioned to do this, because what an exciting time to see so many movies about prohibition and during that time and what they did. And I'm not saying that was the best alcohol to have, of course. A lot of it was bathtub gin. But how does this time equate to that is what I'm saying.
Well, I think we just have a lot more awareness, right? So I think back then you had, Sam Bronfman and Sidney Rosensteel, which was Shinley, and a handful of others who were ready when Prohibition was repealed. They had aged whiskey and they were able to build brands quickly, whereas the general public had no idea what was going to happen. I think in this case we have a lot more awareness and a lot more people, young entrepreneurs all over the place, who have ideas and are trying to jump in, and that's a thriving market. I mean, I'll go back to what you said a little while ago. It's a little bit like the .com era. The first wave of .com, there was everybody and their brother had a plan, and they got funding, and they created some kind of website, and some of them had sock puppets, and some of them had craziness in it. And then there was a shakeout, and then what emerged out of that was Google and Amazon and later Facebook and other ones, right? And there was a lot of disruption along the way. We're going to see the same thing. It's capitalism at work. There's going to be disruption. There's going to be winners. There's going to be a bunch of losers. But, that's part of what makes it great.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I know it's hard to say, but let's try to with the law here. There are a couple of women who are going to be on the episode here at the top of the show, and then I interview one of them right after that, right at the top of the hour, and they basically changed the law through their own means, whatever, but really the passion, the individual passion they have inside themselves. Please tell me, no matter what it is, cannabis, and I know this might be out of your realm, but please tell me that's still possible. The Mr. Smith goes to Washington and says, I can change this. People are on that level saying it starts with me and I want to change things. Because when that happens, it's usually for the better. Please tell me you think that's still possible.
Not only will I say that, I will say that no law gets changed without that. So you have to have passionate people that believe in things to get things done. Now, not every passionate person that believes in things will get the law changed, but you can't really get people in Washington or in government to make changes unless people that really believe in stuff fight for it. And I'm excited to see the episode, but I know who you're talking about, and they're powerful ladies, and they won the day. And that's happening in state houses across the country. And it is happening. It's going to happen in Washington. We're going to get federal prohibition repeal, and there's a bright future ahead of us. And we just need to get the politicians to wake up and listen to the public. And, it's happening.
And by the way, folks, if you want to watch this episode, it won't be right here. It's not connected to this, but just go to Facebook or YouTube and look up The High Road. It's episode 3, and it deals with the laws in Colorado. And, of course, from there, the laws across the country. By the way, Smoke Wallen, who's also a friend of mine, he's going to be in an episode of The High Road coming up sometime soon. But I really appreciate your time. I love that this is probably one of the very few, if not the only, bipartisan issue. I mean, there are a few things, of course, and it's nice to see politicians coming together on something like this, because I was not a user, and I looked into it and discovered so many people are being helped with it. I know there's the business side, of course, and the laws have to change and all of that. But for me, when people get benefits and it eases someone's suffering, I think that's the best time to change the law, and for the best reason. Thank you for being on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate it.
Here we go. This is episode 3 of The High Road. Stick around afterwards for our discussion. Thanks for joining me.